Buckingham Palace had never seen a day like this. Cameras flashed, guests whispered, and the air was thick with excitement as Camilla, dressed in deep green velvet, waltzed down the crimson carpet with her son Tom beside her. It was her moment, one she had carefully orchestrated to put Tom's brand Royal Nutrition under the monarchy's golden light. This wasn't just a food event. This was Camilla declaring power in the most public way possible. On the surface, it looked like a noble initiative to modernize royal dining, but beneath that polished veneer, a storm was brewing. Inside the palace's grand hall, the setting was nothing short of breathtaking. Golden chandeliers twinkled above velvet-covered tables, each place setting pristine as if cut from some luxury ad. Rows of dishes arrived with military precision. Rich soups, delicate pastries, meats soaked in heritage sauces. Each plate bore the unmistakable Royal Nutrition emblem, symbolizing not just Camilla's vision, but her attempt to cement Tom's place within the palace machine. The branding was everywhere. From the food packaging to the embroidered napkins, it was clear this event wasn't about nutrition. It was about legacy. William sat stiffly beside Kate and young George. He hadn't wanted to come. He hadn't wanted George to be here either, dressed in a tailored little suit, smiling shyly each time a camera flashed. But Charles had urged it. "Support the family," he'd said. William relented, but unease coiled inside him. Something didn't feel right. Camilla raised her glass. Her toast echoed through the hall with practiced elegance. "To a future where our children eat not just to live, but to thrive. This is the monarchy's commitment." Applause thundered, but William barely clapped. His eyes stayed fixed on George, who sat next to him, cheeks flushed from the crowd's attention. The child didn't touch his plate much, just nibbled, smiled when told, and looked up occasionally at his father, seeking reassurance. And then it happened. A chair screeched. A goblet fell. Gasps cut through the orchestral music. George stood up slowly, his small body trembling, his face pale. In a second that felt like an hour, he clutched his stomach, stumbled forward, and collapsed. The hall exploded into chaos. Kate screamed his name. William lunged to the floor. "George!" His voice cracked as he scooped his son into his arms, panic ripping through every nerve. Around them, other guests were collapsing too, clutching their throats, leaning on tables, coughing violently. A countess vomited into a velvet napkin. The illusion of royalty shattered in a blink. Medical teams were summoned in seconds. Ambulances, unheard of in palace grounds, screamed through the gates. Flashbulbs went off outside as reporters scrambled to capture the mayhem. The headline was written before the night even ended. "Prince George collapses at Camilla's banquet. Mass food poisoning suspected. Buckingham in chaos." Hours later, the palace was sealed. Staff whispered in corners. Officials scrambled for damage control. Camilla claimed it was a tragic accident. Tom refused to speak, but William wasn't buying it, not for a second. He remembered the way Camilla had smiled during the toast, the smug pride on Tom's face as the dishes rolled out, and the way she looked at George just before the collapse, as if watching something she had dared fate to interrupt. Back in his private study, William shut the door and ordered silence. He stared at the wall for a long time before picking up his phone. "Get me someone who can test the food," he told his most trusted aide. "Not our labs. Someone independent, and do it quietly. Because whatever had happened to George, it wasn't random. It wasn't just bad luck." And William? He was about to go all the way to find out the truth, even if that meant tearing Buckingham's walls apart brick by brick. The test results arrived in a thick envelope with no royal seal, just a blank cover and a nervous courier who refused to speak a word. Inside were printouts, chemical charts, and a short note from the lab's lead analyst. William didn't need to read beyond the first paragraph. Ban preservatives. Industrial-grade stabilizer. Traces of allergens outlawed in palace kitchens for years, found in multiple dishes served that day, including the very soup George had eaten. This wasn't some minor oversight. It was deliberate negligence, maybe worse. He stared at the papers, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. The implications were nuclear. This wasn't just about George's health or the chaos at the banquet. This was about betrayal. Someone inside had either ignored the protocols or intentionally overridden them. And and all signs pointed to one source, royal nutrition. Camilla hadn't spoken publicly since the incident, but William noticed how she moved through the palace, less like a grieving stepmother, more like a strategist caught in a corner. He'd seen the way she glanced at Tom during the chaos, and he remembered her words from that toast, "We nourish future generations with the very best." The irony was almost sickening. Meanwhile, George recovered slowly. Kate never left his side. The media, hungry for every detail, filled the airwaves with speculation. Was Camilla's event sabotaged? Is Tom Parker Bowles responsible? Did the royal family turn a blind eye for profit? Protesters gathered outside the palace gates, waving signs that read "Justice for George" and "No more royal brands." Online, hashtags exploded. Every hour brought a new theory, a new accusation, and more public fury. William didn't bother waiting for permission. He called for a press conference. The idea shook the advisors. Airing dirty laundry, challenging the queen consort in public, unheard of, but he didn't care. This wasn't politics anymore, it was personal. On the day of the announcement, the palace was swarmed. Media crews from every continent lined the gates. The grand hall was turned into a media arena. Cameras clicked like gunfire. At the front, William stood alone at the podium. No flag, no throne, just a folder of hard proof in his hands. He didn't speak like royalty. He spoke like a man with nothing left to lose. "This isn't about tradition. This is about accountability," he began, his voice steady but cold. "My son, Prince George, nearly died from food prepared and approved under the banner of royal nutrition. That food contained banned substances that had no place in our kitchens or anyone's." He lifted the lab results, flashed them to the cameras. "These are the findings. Independent, verified, and damning. These ingredients were not approved, they were not reviewed by palace staff. Someone cut corners and people suffered." Murmurs erupted in the hall. Flashes blinded. Camilla and Tom sat off to the side, stony-faced. Neither of them spoke. William turned toward them, not the cameras. "Camilla, Tom, I'm offering you a choice. Admit what happened, take responsibility. Compensate every person affected by your negligence, or face a criminal investigation. There will be no special treatment. Not from me. Not from this palace." Gasps followed. A queen consort threatened with prison on live television? Camilla stared ahead, unmoving. Tom looked like he might vomit. The room fell frozen in time. Reporters shouted questions, but William ignored them. He stepped back from the mic, dropped the folder on the table, and walked away. The message had been sent. The battle lines were drawn, and the British monarchy would never be the same again. Camilla's silence didn't last. By sunset, a carefully worded statement from the palace confirmed everything the public had demanded to hear. She and Tom had accepted responsibility. Funds allocated from the royal treasury to sponsor the event would be returned. Every guest hospitalized during the banquet would be compensated. And most significantly, royal nutrition would be permanently shut down, effective immediately. But the real punishment wasn't legal, it was social. Camilla, once the orchestrator of public appearances and royal elegance, vanished. No more ribbon cuttings, no garden parties, no quiet waves from the back of luxury Bentleys. Camilla was seen only once in the days that followed, wrapped in a dark coat, scarf hiding her face, slipping into a car without plates. The woman who once declared herself the standard bearer of modern royal identity had become a ghost in her own castle. Tom, meanwhile, crumbled publicly. The headquarters of Royal Nutrition was gutted overnight. The signage was taken down, investors pulled out, and former employees took to social media exposing every ignored warning, every cut corner. One former staff member posted a photo of a discarded invoice labeled "Unauthorized Preservative Batch Rush Order." It went viral in minutes. Tom had lost more than a business. He'd lost whatever respect remained of his public image. William didn't celebrate. He wasn't interested in victory laps. But he moved swiftly to restore trust where the damage had run deepest. Within a week, he announced the launch of a new initiative, the Royal Food Oversight Fund. It would operate independently of palace authority, with scientists, regulators, and watchdogs ensuring no product tied to the royal name ever bypassed public safety laws again. No more handshakes behind closed doors, no more silent approvals. At the press briefing, William stood beside Kate, who looked as steady as ever. "This isn't just about what happened in this palace," he said. "It's about every parent who wants to know what their child is eating. Every citizen who believes those in power should be held accountable. My family's name means nothing if we don't protect the people who trust us with it. That statement landed harder than any accusation. It rewrote how the monarchy presented itself. No longer a detached relic of tradition, but a modern institution that could admit failure and rebuild with transparency. Public opinion shifted. William's approval rating soared. Even those who had long distanced themselves from the royals found themselves saying, well, at least he stood up when it mattered. In coffee shops, on buses, in pubs, people talked about the press conference, about George's recovery, about how everything nearly went so wrong, and how, just maybe, someone had finally gotten it right. George returned home a few days later. He smiled as photographers captured him stepping out of the car, holding both his parents' hands. The image spread like wildfire. A boy protected, a family intact, and a future still unwritten. That moment said what no press release ever could. Back inside the palace, things were quieter. The corridors still echoed, but now with something gentler, less fear, less suspicion. William walked those halls holding George's hand, the weight on his shoulders not gone, but shared. He wasn't just a prince anymore. He was a father who had nearly lost his son to the greed and ambition of people within his own family, and stood tall to stop it. The scandal would be studied, written about, debated for years. But in that golden hour light with George safe, Kate smiling faintly, and the worst finally behind them, William understood one thing with absolute clarity. Truth doesn't bend for royalty, and neither would he.